Thanks everyone who watched my previous video on Legions Imperialis. It had over 1,000 views, so in order to keep people's enthusiasm up, I've made another one. Now, I played a lot of Space Marine when I was younger, and I've played a bit of Net Epic lately. And there are some things that I think are great in both games, some things that are good in one, and some things that are just bad in both. So here's my list of 5 things the game should keep, and 5 things they should change. I've tried not to include things we already know are changing. So we've already seen that the game will use inches instead of centimetres, and it's going to be 8mm scale now. It's a shame, but it can't be helped. We've also seen that the fly rules will be very, very different, and I think that's probably a good thing. But if there's anything else, forgive me. There have been so many articles due to the delay that I might have forgotten something. Now, I'll start with one I want to change, but I don't want to be too negative, so I'll start with something I want to use differently rather than something that I think needs wholesale removal or redesign. Net Epic has a wide range of optional rules, many of which are pretty sensible, but they lead to debates of exactly what to use and what not to. And obviously, opinions vary player by player. I think including optional rules as part of specific missions rather than based on game-by-game negotiations between players would work a lot better. Space Marine didn't have enough optional rules, so they need to fix that. But there's a potential lack of variety from game to game. Net Epic has the special rules, but organised in a way that's problematic rather than beneficial. Something to keep is the basic scoring mechanism. And I think we've had confirmation that the rules will follow the spirit of this, but hopefully it will barely change at all. Default scoring that has cumulative kill points and non-cumulative scoring updated turn by turn on objectives works really well. You need to not surrender objectives too early because you could give the game away. But you also need to not bother seizing them until you've killed enough things to grab you the win. It's a nice balance. However, base it on the actual points rather than rounding up from say 150 to 200 and make that worth 2 victory points. Some 2,000 point armies can be worth as few as 20 victory points, obviously, but others can easily be worth 25 victory points. Either just add up the actual points or give out half victory points if you need to. It's not that hard. People can cope with the maths of that. Now, in my previous video, I mentioned a campaign that my friend Paul is running, and since then I played one of his custom missions against my friend Nathan. The main difference compared to normal was that we each had an objective in our own deployment that was worth extra victory points to our opponent. It really encouraged different tactics to normal, so I think that's really a good idea. Of course, this is an opportunity to vary scoring by having multiple mission types, and it would be certainly good to have a variety of mission types to mix things up a bit. But if this isn't the basic one, I'll find opponents to play that way anyway. The third thing is to do with orders. Now, in Space Marine 2nd Edition, once all the orders have been placed, both players reveal all of their orders. I prefer the Net Epic way of doing things, where orders are only revealed once a unit is activated. As there's already a difference between those two things, I can't really say it's a keep or a change, but I'm going to hedge my answer and call this one a change because we're changing from the original. Now, this way of doing things retains the Net Epic way of doing things, retains the fog of war element for longer. It keeps you trying to get inside your opponent's head for longer, and it allows you to try and interpret his thinking as other orders are revealed and draws out the suspense. It practically turns Epic into a game of poker. Something to keep, I hope, is Titan datasheets, and I don't think we've heard too much about this. It worries me that they might try to simplify Titans and randomise where you hit or something like that, instead of letting you pick a target and then scatter from there with the up and down and the left and right dice. I think it was pretty much perfect as it was, though I do think everything should get +1 to hit Titans. It's actually easier to hit a Rhino transport than a Titan when you take into account the risk of scattering from your original target location to an empty square. Okay, this is a biggie for me. Transport rules in Net Epic are very generous in terms of moving infantry around the board. I was feeling in some of my first few games that it was almost too easy for my Chaos Marines to seize buildings in the middle of the table against people who with fewer mobile infantry, but it didn't feel completely game breaking. Maybe I was biased. In that game against Nathan that I mentioned, he shot some Assault Marines up in Rhinos. Then they had another 25 centimetres still to go. We were using the optional rule that Rhinos from a detachment don't have to stay in coherency with the infantry of a detachment, and it gave them a 70 centimetre charge range. That definitely felt too much, I think. In the original rules, it was a bit too fiddly. If an infantry unit moved 3/4 of its movement, the transport could make 1/4 of its movement, or stuff like that. You get the idea. That puts in a layer of maths that can be quite fiddly and will put people off. So I'd like to see a rule that says if any units get in or out, the infantry get their full movement and the transport automatically still gets half of its movement. That would still give you a big movement boost by having transports, but I don't think it would break things. Now that makes it more likely that infantry would need to stay in their transports beyond turn 1. So on a related note, I'd like to see the bailout rules from Net Epic stay in place. Space Marine just said that if you're in a vehicle and it gets destroyed, the stands inside it get destroyed as well. But I think an unmodified 4+ roll against shooting and maybe in combat as well would make more sense. There's a case to be made that protecting occupied transports from close combat anyway is an interesting tactical element of the game could be good. Regardless of how you do it, you're going to need to make a trade-off between getting your infantry further up the board versus them getting blown up while they're still in their transports, and I think that can add an interesting tactical element to the game if you do it that way. So transport rules are definitely a change compared to either Space Marine or Net Epic. I never played Net Epic Armageddon or the original Armageddon, so perhaps they have a better solution. Comment if you have an idea of what could be a good way of doing it. Next up, I want to talk about the army building rules. For me, so much of the flavour of the game came from that army building structure. The company level detachment supported by special cards and support cards is so central to my memories of the game that I'd actually hate to not have it this time. I doubt we'll get the actual company cards, but I hope they use that structure, and the company cards are the dream, to be honest. The elegance of the army building in Epic compared to the mess we've seen in some editions of 40k is really a high point for me. 28mm Horus Heresy has a fairly good system too, but why try and just cover something we've already done in another game? Let's have a good system of its own for Legions Imperialis. On to point defence, and this one's not a great big deal, but it points towards a thought I have about the design ethos of the game that I want to share as well, so I'm putting this one in. The point defence rules were introduced into Net Epic and they make sense. I can see why people wanted them, but I'm not really sure they add that much to the game. A 6+ shooting attack with no save modifiers and fairly puny weapons can have an effect in some situations, but often it just adds dice rolls to little or no benefit. Kind of how 40k used to see mass dice rolls praying for 6s every time a unit got charged, even if it was unlikely to make any difference, because you never know. I think I prefer to see things with point defence. Replace that with a bonus in the turn they get charged. Giving a special rule for that runs the risk of adding special rules left, right and centre, but the Horus Heresy 28mm game does a really good job, I think, of giving special rules that make things feel different to each other. It was quite tough in the first few games to remember all of those special rules, but once you get them down, I think they actually add very little mental load to each game. Certainly less than having a million different stratagems, thousands of different ones for each and every codex in 40k 9th edition. I mean, they added up all of those stratagems for all the different publications and codices. They did add up to more than a million, right? Something back on a let's keep it stage. I couldn't decide now whether to talk about pinning classes or snapfire. I think both are pretty safe to assume they'll be included. So I've gone with the one that I think might get mucked about with by the games designers, even if they don't remove it completely. Snapfire being available to units who are on snapfire is really important. And in NetEpic you can do it whether you've revealed the orders or whether those orders are still hidden. It does come with a -1 to hit penalty, so there is a trade-off between shooting that thing right now or waiting for a better shot at something later that might not be such a high priority, but you're more likely to actually hit it. And making decisions should be at the core of the game. Whether you choose the right thing to do should make a difference to the outcome. So I really want to see things like that in the game as often as possible. Plasma weapons, it's another fairly small one. I don't think this is going to break the game. But again, it speaks to these ideas about how you have your ethos for the game design. In Space Marine and Titan Legions back in the 90s, plasma cannons and plasma destructors come with severe penalties. Cannons don't allow you to use other weapons if you fire them, and the destructors don't even allow you to move, leaving you temporarily immobilized and vulnerable in combat. But NetEpic added more expensive versions as well, which basically upgraded the weapons or the reactor core and removed those restrictions. Sure, it made it more expensive, a lot more expensive, but it makes Warlord Titans potentially far too powerful. Whilst we're at it though, let's reduce the cost of the fire control towers. They're just not sensible. The cost from an extra hit that you're going to get from having a fire control tower at 75 points in NetEpic is never cost effective for any weapon in the game. It's never the best choice, and it lowers your armor save on that hit location. They're cool, and I've converted one for my new Legio Furians Warlord that I'm building, but it isn't a good choice. Don't let us just pay to build more super units, I guess though is the main point of this particular change I want to see. Force us into compromise, make us make decisions. Do we want to take a risk and have that fantastic weapon, or do we want to play it safer and be able to defend ourselves in close combat? Now a short one that I want to keep, but this is a fun one, so I'm going to end on it here as something I love that they've definitely got to keep. You've got to let me keep destroying buildings. You've just got to. Now, I know GW loves to sell us their terrain kits these days, but that doesn't mean it should be invulnerable and we shouldn't be able to take it off the building and replace it with rubble. I really hope they let us keep blowing up buildings and destroying the infantry inside. It's just so rewarding. I don't know why, it just is. And if I can take down a God engine, surely I can take down a building. Please let us keep blowing up buildings. Okay, that's it. Before I go though, let me just say one or two things. You probably followed this link from knowing me from Arbiter Ian's Taylor 4 Gamers. And don't forget, we're going to be doing Legions Imperialis when it comes out. I'm really looking forward to it. My NetEpic stuff that I'm doing is literally just to get me in the mood for that and help me think about what rules are going to work and how they're going to work and how I want to build an army for that. And the fact NetEpic is just really fun in its own right, and I've missed it for a long time. Now, I also saw we're going to get a battle report in the next White Dwarf. We can look forward to knowing a lot more about a lot of this stuff very soon, I think. I find myself wondering if the battle report has been put in White Dwarf because the new release date is imminent, or because it was scheduled ages ago and it was too late to alter the print schedule. Here's hoping, though, that this battle report coming up is a good sign. You never know, you might even be viewing this video once we have a Legions Imperialis release date, and that'll be great. So, try and stay enthusiastic. The game is coming. It's going to be an amazing game. We're all going to enjoy it a lot. And I look forward to seeing you in another one of these videos, which, by the way, I'm going to start calling First Fire Orders. I think I'm going to try and keep this little series going if people keep watching. And, yeah, if I don't see you there, I'll definitely see you back on Taylor 4 Gamers. Bye!